welcome to our first video edition of our CityRise cast, and great to have you with us. Also great to have our guest with the PTSD Foundation. David is here. We're going to hear about his work, the work of the foundation. And so just going to jump right in. David, tell us about yourself. Tell us what PTSD Foundation essentially does.
Sure. PTSD Foundation of America, based here in Houston, Texas, national footprint, but we're serving America's veterans and their families as they deal with the effects of combat-related post-traumatic stress. And we do that in a number of ways, but it's a faith-based, peer-to-peer model that we use. And then we bring in an awful lot of additional tools to deal with the mental health aspect of what's going on.
All right. Has the foundation existed for a while? Is it fairly new? Are you fairly new to it? Or
we began hitting the streets here in Houston in 2009, just trying to meet some of the veterans who were dealing with the symptoms of PTSD, trying to help them. And then it just morphed into quite an organization now.
Okay. Have you been with it from the beginning?
Yes. Well, from the days of 2009 when we first hit the streets. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, what brought, we see it on the news occasionally, but what brought it to your attention to go from what the government may or may not provide to a ministry approach to this?
Yeah, the statistic at the time in Houston was 1 out of every 3 adult homeless persons was a military veteran. And of course, 2009, we were still heavily involved in Iraq, Afghanistan, but a lot of guys were coming home. And a lot of them were ended up on the streets. It was happened very quickly. And in addition to that, we were starting to see suicide rates go up dramatically in the military community. So that's what was our initial urgency. Let's see what we can do to address that. And then we'll just kind of go from there.
Okay. Now, you just shared privately that your background's not military. What was your ministry, your background before capturing or tackling this?
Been in ministry my adult life. Worked with an evangelist for 10 years, traveled the world with him, and then went into pastoring, and then wanted to just get my hands dirty. And that's kind of where this came in. Let's go hit the streets and try to impact some lives.
Again, I'm a novice. I don't know this field that much, but it would seem what I have read that many times it's the spouse and the family that suffer as much as maybe the vet. Is there ministry for both sides of that equation?
Yeah, and there's what we call as legitimate secondary PTSD that happens with the family quite often. We've seen that a lot with our Vietnam veteran families, but also in our post 9/11 as well. But we really saw it heavily in the Vietnam folks, and they didn't know what it was, so they didn't know how to deal with it. So yes, there are a lot of things going on for the family in our organization. We have an entire team that helps the family understand what happened to their loved one in PTSD. Do a lot of soft boundaries, loving, careful boundaries, because many times, and you're not going to understand it, your son comes home from war, and you're just glad he's home, right? And he's got both of his arms and legs and his eyes, and I'm just so glad you're home. And there's a lot of enabling that was going on. And so we had to step in and try to teach families, we got to stop the enablement. We have to, because one decision is just leading to 12 more bad decisions. So we've got to help deal with that. Oh, now with our residential program, where we're bringing veterans in from all across the country and living with us for up to a year, we're also having to support the family while that husband is here, father is here, brother, son, whoever. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do to help with the family back home, and also dealing with their own PTSD while their loved one's here.
Yeah, you mentioned many in the homeless spectrum. Are there job training or those type of transitional skill workshops? Because it's very complex when you get into the homeless.
It's very complex. Everything about what we do is complex. But once they complete the basics of our program, they do enter into what we call the transition phase, the aftercare, and that is helping them step forward, whatever that looks like. It may be a new career, maybe going to school, maybe just going home and they're living off disability, but whatever that is, we're trying to prepare them for that. So we do Berkman personality tests while they're with us. We do a lot of things to help them understand, here's what your strengths, your skill sets are, here's what your mindset is, here's, a better path for you maybe than what you've been looking for previously. So we do work very diligently on setting them up to be for long-term success.
Sure. Now, do you guys partner with local churches? It would seem to me many churches are probably not well equipped. And so are there ways to be equipped where you could introduce some of these guys and say, this is the best way to come alongside? Or
We're constantly working with churches. There's relatively few, considering the number of churches in the Houston area,
Right.
that are really involved in that, have strong veteran ministries. So that's kind of who we initially reached out to. You're already reaching veterans, serving them. Let's come along and help partner with you on that. And we can serve each other. And it doesn't cost anybody anything.
Yeah.
It's just let's help get these people to a better place. So there are a number of churches that are involved in different ways. Sometimes they're just coming out and doing work projects.
Right.
Sometimes they'll come out and do Bible studies. They'll cook for the guys on Saturday, play checkers, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of different ways to get involved for our churches as well.
So do you have a site, one residential site in the greater Houston area? What part of town you located?
We have one residential site. It's the north side of town, just by the Sam Houston horse racetrack, right off the Beltway. We have an additional place we call the ranch in the Tomball area, where it's non-residential, but veterans can come and hang out during the day. Someone needs just somebody to talk to. They just need a meal. They just need some place where they feel safe and accepted. That's the ranch in Tomball. So we have a couple of different opportunities in the Houston area.
Sure. Our listeners always love to hear stories. Can you tell of maybe a veteran who has come through and you would say, yeah, this guy came in pretty difficult straits mentally, financially, whatever it may be. And now we can see him engaged in work, family in a better way?
I can give you hundreds of stories.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's crazy because when we first began, our goal was just, let's see if we can help save one life.
Sure.
Literally, that was it. And then it was whatever it costs, whatever it takes to get that accomplished. And today we've had over 1,800 veterans come through our residential program, thousands of others through our other programs as well. But one is currently running our programming at our residential facility that we call Camp Hope. But about 5 years ago, he attempted suicide by cop in Florida. And there were, a lot of complexities involved in all that. And he'd started a business. It was going well. Then it didn't go well. His wife was very committed to him, and she had heard of Camp Hope. And so she actually told him, I'm taking away every excuse you've got. You've now lost your business. I'm moving to Houston because that's where Camp Hope is. And I hope someday you'll join me.
Wow.
So she actually moved to Houston, got an apartment with the purpose of him coming here. And he finally, after waking up from a psychosis event with multiple firearms pointed at him from police officers, he should have been dead by all rights. That's what should have happened. But instead, he ends up going to jail. The judge allowed him to come to Camp Hope. He came through our program, completed our program, started volunteering for us. Then he started driving for us because we were moving veterans around all day, every day, parole and doctor's visits and all those kinds of things. So he started driving, and then he's just worked his way up through mentor to today he's actually the director of programming for Camp Hope. He and his wife are very happily married. They since coming to Houston now have 2 beautiful children. And making a positive impact in life. And there's a guy that, again, by all rights should be dead. He served us in the military. He went to the most evil, awful part of the planet, faced the most evil people on the planet, came home and dealt with the effects of that trauma. And today he's completely changed his life. And it cost him and his family nothing. Everything we do for the veteran and their family is free. It's just a long program and it's a lot of work, but he did the work. God did some amazing things in he and his family's life. And it's an incredible thing to see what he can do today and helping other veterans through the process.
Wow, that is amazing. Again, I don't want to get controversial, but sometimes I'll see PTSD and it's related to something totally non-military. And honestly, I don't follow, I don't understand. So I don't know if it's just political correctness? Or, I mean, how do you deal if someone calls and says, I had this rough background or whatever, I think I have PTSD?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because in 2009, again, PTSD, nobody really even heard the term. It was a term, but nobody knew what it was. Today, it is a bit of a buzzword, and it's also become a bit of a joke. You see, joked around, and it's not a joke. It's quite serious. It takes an awful lot of lives through suicide and addiction. So it's a tragedy how people use it. But anyone can have PTSD as a result of trauma, any kind of trauma. And it's serious. It needs to be taken seriously. We deal specifically with combat-related trauma. So what we do when people reach out to us about other traumas, we have a great network that we've built through the years. And we may not be the people for them, but we're going to make sure they get put into a good place where they have plenty of opportunity to get the help and the resources that they need, because it's very real and it's very deadly when left untreated.
Sure. Now, if a pastor's listening and he thinks, okay, well, I would like our church maybe to come alongside. How would he do that? What steps would be the easiest way to find you and to maybe take an orientation or check out the facility?
Sure. Our website, of course, ptsdusa.org. So post-traumatic stress disorder, ptsdusa.org is the best way to get in contact with us. There's a way to sign up to take a tour of our campus, learn about our programming. And obviously, I'm always happy to talk to pastors, anyone else, business folks, anyone that's interested in learning more about what's going on in our veteran community and how they can be a part of helping them get to a better spot.
Sure.
So we're always ready to have that conversation.
Great. Well, again, many of our partners are listening. We have partners who work with the homeless. And so if they do come across ex-military, that would be an easy kind of connection there. Other partners who work with mental health, with other avenues of ministry, I guess they would just come through that same avenue to make contact with you guys.
It's the easiest way. Or social media also. There's a lot of people that contact us through social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah.
It's a good way to connect with us. But there's 1,001 opportunities. We work with dental offices, eye care offices, everybody that has a heart to help our veterans. There's plenty of opportunity. Just tell people don't volunteer unless you're serious, because we will bring you some opportunity to help some people. Yeah.
Now, without having a major conflict, and again, that's in the eye of the beholder, whoever's involved in the war, the conflict is major to them. But it's been a few years since there's been a high profile, high deployment. Do we see numbers going down, or are they stable?
No, in fact, what you see many times is there's a delay before veterans start to really have symptoms of PTSD.
Right.
And then many times, at least the ones that come to our residential facility, it's not until they have run a very dark circle of downward spiral, bad decisions before they come to us. Yeah. But it can be years. We've had Korean War veterans that sit in my office and tell me, they came home from Korea and went to work and did fine. When they retired, they began to notice some things were up. Sure. And that's when they went to seek help and were diagnosed with PTSD. Yeah. So it was actually decades later.
Wow.
So it's not always something that you notice instantly.
Sure. My father fought in Korea, and he passed a few years ago in his upper 80s. So, well, if others are listening and maybe they're concerned and think, well, maybe a loved one does have a PTSD. We read about some signs, but you would know better than us. What would you look for?
What PTSD usually does is kind of like pouring gas on the fire. So whatever issues they may have had prior to the trauma, and it's getting increasingly worse, those things you need to pay attention to. But hyperanxiety is certainly one. People would always have to have their back to the wall so they can see entrances, exits, all those kinds of things. Inability to be in a crowd, excessive drinking, excessive whatever. The quicker, to jump and get angry and mad and whatever the response is. When you see that getting worse and worse, when you start to see them isolating, that's the number one issue for suicidal tendencies.
Yeah.
Once you start seeing them isolate, you really got to step in and do something quickly.
Mm.
And we tell folks all the time, look, I know feels uncomfortable to ask certain questions,
Right.
but it's much better to ask a question that's uncomfortable to you than later on stand and look at it to a casket and see the reality of what was going on. So have the conversation, ask the question, non-judgmentally, just how can I help you? Yeah. We've got to get more comfortable with asking those questions and then following through with that.
Sure. Always ask, what should I have asked? What would you like our hearers to know that maybe we hadn't addressed?
You know, everyone, you don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be a psychiatrist, psychologist. All you have to do is care. Yeah. And you can at least be that first opportunity to show somebody a little bit of hope. And that's what it's all about. Because many times they just feel like there is no hope. Yeah. And their family's better off without them. The world better off if they didn't exist, because everywhere they go, they just cause problems. And just to be willing to give a listening ear, and again, non-judgmental. Like, I don't know all the answers, but I do care, and I will listen. And then, we'll reach out till we find the right solution. But there's always a solution. Sure. And there's always an answer. And of course, we know it to be Jesus ultimately. Right. But along the way, there's a lot of things that a lot of us can do to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And that's what we want to try to do.
Well, super. Well, PTSD Foundation, obviously a niche, but a needed ministry, one that doesn't get the profile of some of the others that are in our network, but it's been very interesting for me to hear this. I hope it has been for you as well. And reach out. He gave the contact information there. If your ministry or your church or you would like to come alongside, just take that first step and see how the Lord may lead. And thank you for joining us on this CityRise Cast.